Okay, so welcome back. So we'll continue this discussion where we left in the previous segment. We were looking at this 8 Millennium Development Goals, which was to be achieved until 2015. We talked about it. So let's look at where we are in terms of how successful were they in terms of implementation of these different reports, different protocol. So if you look at here, in terms of, so how successful were all these protocols? If you look at the 1990, 2000 versus 2000 to 2015 rate of progress, and this is the acceleration ratio. So here you talk about from 0% to 100%, the share of problem eliminated between 1990 and 2015. This comes from some of these World Bank and UN reports. So as you can see, we do have in this low income countries, excluding India, and the middle income countries, which is excluding China. This, if you look at, so there has been some progress in terms of share of problems eliminated. You see that in terms of sanitation, water, material mortality, child mortality, things have kind of improved, things have moved in terms of making certain progress. Similarly, in the middle income also, the water, sanitation, child mortality, they have done better, slightly better. So again, it depends on if the country has more money, they can spend more emphasis there. India and China is excluded because India and China by themselves is a huge population, and then that was, if you put that number gets a bit skewed. We will look at India and China separately as well. So especially India will look at. Then we had 2002, we had this World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, which they come up with a plan to reduce poverty and protect the environment. So it was the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002. Then 2012, we had the Sustainable Development in Rio, which was they had this. These are some of these major objectives: poverty reduction, clean energy, sustainable development. And the major outcome that they could achieve was working groups on sustainable development goals, which was done later on. The detailed SDGs that we know today, we will talk about those as well in this course. So Rio plus 20, that was the United Nations Conference Development Program. Other than just making this working group, this particular summit didn't had much success, which kind of people think that a opportunity was lost actually. So in 2015, UN Climate Change Conference COP21 was held in Paris in France. The 196 countries participated, agreed to reduce emissions, carbon output, and to do their best to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade. 2 degrees centigrade is considered as the threshold number when things will start going really bad, and we are already seeing some impact of climate change in, say, Indian subcontinent. If those of us who are from Bengal, or any one of you who are familiar with the geography of India, we have Gangasagar Islands. Many of those islands, we have been losing those islands because of sea level rise. There has been reports, there has been some predictions that Maldives will have a severe implications because of sea level rise, and many of the coastal cities in India will have implications as well. So that's the reason why we wanted to keep it below 2 degrees centigrade to reduce the impact of this climate change. So this Paris Paris Summit, the COP21, they sets the target for reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, implementation of measures, financing methods, and to adapt climate change to and to mitigate its effects. So that's those were the focus. So there were 196 countries. They later on there were some issues associated with this like a goal. So then also they come up with this 2030 agenda. The UN has came up with this 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So these are the, just to summarize, if you look at in the last 10-15 years, the different things that has happened, the main climate summits, and if you look at their and kind of talk about their achievement a little bit. So 2019 we have COP25 in Chile, held in COP25 and Chile, and 2018 rules of Paris agreement was done. This COP23 2017 there was in Fiji, then there was 14 in Lama, Paris, Paris Agreement comes into effect in 2016. In 2013, the International Warsaw Mechanism was developed. Kyoto Protocol in 2012, COP17 in Durban, then Cancun, and United Nations Framework for Climate Change, Kyoto Protocol, Bali, Copenhagen. So there was a huge several numbers of climate change summits happened. If you just count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14 climate summits that it's just you're showing up on this particular slide. But if you look at their achievements, which we'll talk in more detail in the class, it's a mixed bag. In some it was good, but some we had the issues associated. We do not achieve the target. But again, we have to try. So there was a lot of still efforts are being made. If you think about what has happened over these years in Indian context, in terms of important environmental rules and acts in India since our independence, we started with in terms of in 1960 we had this Ministry of Agriculture announced loans for composting of agricultural waste as part of solid waste. Then we had Environmental Protection Act, it came in 1986, hazardous waste rule in 1989. Then in terms of waste management in India, one of the biggest thing which happened was Surat plague. In between we had the Bhopal gas tragedy as well. It's here somewhere between 1984. So Surat plague raised a lot of awareness about the waste management problem. Then we have this Bajaj committee, we had Burman committee, then we had this municipal solid waste rules, the battery rules, manual for managing waste, biomedical waste rules. Then we had this Kyoto Protocol came in, hazardous waste rule was revised. We had now after in last 5-6 years and last 10 years and so a lot of other activities in terms of e-waste rules, plastic waste, then revisions of all these different waste management related stuff, and also NGT came into National Green Tribunal. We had Swachh Bharat Mission, Subramaniam Committee, National Action Plan, CPHO manual. So these are some of those highlights. These are not the entire picture. We had our clean water and clean air and all those acts were also there, and then there were a lot of protocols and others are also developed in terms of preventing different types of pollution. So this is like we had this Water Prevention and Control Act in 1974, Water Prevention and Control Pollution Cess Act 77, Air Act 1981, Environmental Protection Act we just talked about in 1986. So there were a lot of rules came in India as well in terms of protecting the environment. And you had this hazardous chemical 1989 replaced by hazardous waste management in 2008, coastal regulation zone, chemical accidents emergency planning rules, biomedical, recycled plastic manufacturing. So plastic waste management, solid waste management, hazardous waste rules, batteries and all the noise pollution. So there are a lot of rules and regulations came into being. The problem in Indian context is not the rule. The problem is more of implementation of the rule and the development of adequate infrastructure to be able to implement those rules. So our rules are for most part they are adequate. Of course, rules everything needs change. When we learn new stuff, we can always change, amend and make it better. But in general, our rules are pretty much quite decent rules, meeting with the global standards. But the problem in Indian context or in many developing countries context is that the proper infrastructure is not there to implement those rules. That's where the problem comes. So those of you who will these days there are quite a many students try to go for UPSC and other stuff after graduating from IITs. So those of you who would like to go to that path, when you become an IAS officer or any position of similar position where you can make certain decision, always my request to you would be that let's develop the infrastructure. Let's make the infrastructure capable so that we can implement these rules. Just having the rules in the books are not going to help. We need to implement those, and when we are trying to implement, if the infrastructure is not there, even as a responsible citizen, many times we are not able to follow those rules because proper infrastructure is not is available. You will hear a lot of those examples as we make progress in the semester. So now what is the path forward? So once there is an intention to pursue sustainability, there has to be a clear need to identify an approach to problems, solving that is evolved from previous approaches, which has not systematically incorporated triple bottom line considerations. So we have to look at healthy people, healthy planet, and healthy your economics as well. So we have to pursue sustainability. We have to look at healthy planet, healthy people kind of concept, and so for that we need to have proper policy choice. And if you have a policy choice which is inefficient food system, if you have too much of a pollution, resource wastage, and climate change impacts, and cities which are not designed properly, we are going to have unhealthy planet and unhealthy people. And we don't want that. We want to have sustainable food system, adaptation to climate change, having a circular economy concept, clean energy, livable cities. So this will be a life-way transformations leading to healthy planet and healthy people. So that's what we need to go for. So the drivers are, of course, the population, development, technology. That's where we have to play, as especially all of us who are engineers. Climate change impacts, urbanization. We already talked a little bit about that. Looking at the biodiversity, land usage, water, air, ocean. So think about all these things. Many of those aspects that we talked that is listed here, they all relate to big picture environmental systems, and they are relevant for every sphere of our life, every careers that we can think of. So that's the reason I said that's the reason why Supreme Court wanted you to have this course, and that's the reason why we are offering this course, so that you get sensitized enough so that whenever you make certain decision, you are aware of the environmental implication, and that's very, very important. In fact, it's important for the survival of us on this particular planet. So how to move from discussion to operation? We have been discussing that these are the problems, these are the issues. So we have to talk about the solutions. And again, this will be discussed in more detail because we have a 2-hour lecture every week. But just snapshot now. Let's look at some of the snapshot. So there is 2 approaches where many times we take. One is the top down and one is the bottom up. So and for most part, for a person like me, I like the bottom up approach, where you take the stakeholders and start from the bottom, because the people who are at the ground, they understand the problem much better than if we are sitting in an AC room and just trying to make some rules and regulation. And that's true for any system, including institutions, including all types of institutions. So there should be a habit of listening to people on the ground, because they face those problems. They can tell you they will give you the feedback. Unfortunate part is that when we sit in a big office in a nice AC room, we're in a big office in a big chair and with a big post attached to it, we start thinking that we are expert of everything, which is, of course, nobody is expert of everything. But that, unfortunately, that thought process comes in. It's more in developing countries than in developed countries. I can say that, like, I have worked in 4 different countries. So based on my experience, I see that more in developing countries, where people sitting in a big chair, in a big position, they think that they are expert of everything, which is sometimes it's funny, but that's how the life is, isn't it? So you will have yours is you have a bottom up perspective, where you look at the issues from the ground up, and you empower people, you leverage, you make an effort, involve your different stakeholders, and then you come up with a decision. What happens in those scenarios is that people participation is more. When you try to push things from the top, the ownership of that thing is not there. Say if I try to push too much things from the top, and the people who will really do the job, they are not with me on that in the same path, the same goal, because they never had this ownership. They never really wanted it. So you just and they were never really told that why it is important. So we have to change. We have to, if we really want to achieve sustainability, we have to really change our mindset in terms of how we work. So rather than having It's the deviation, it's an ideal is where you bottom up planning, which is the like ideal scenarios. Top down is for some issues, like for your deviation, if you have too much of top down planning, you can create like a chaos and as well. To say for some cases you may have to, like law and order and other stuff, you will probably have to have a top down, but in general when we talk about day to day affair, if it's a self organized transformation, that's really it stays for a long period of time. So, we'll talk more in detail in terms of different things associated with that. So, from an environmental point of view, we always talk about the framework in terms of how to achieve these sustainability goals. We can go about sustainability goals. The two frameworks, we have this life cycle thinking and the systems thinking, which are also interconnected. Life cycle thinking is focused on material and energy flows and subsequent impacts, while systems thinking can also capture the relationship between political, cultural, social, economic consideration and potential feedback between these considerations and material and energy flows. So, you have to have you take those considerations in picture as well. So, that's it's your in terms of your different how to achieve overall sustainability goal, we look at these aspects. So, in terms of life cycle thinking, if you look at some example, it takes a holistic view of the production and consumption of a product or a service and assess its impact on the environment through the entire life cycle. So, it goes beyond focusing on a specific site or product. So, we start from material extraction, we look at the material processing, manufacturing, product use, end of life, and then it's in the product use you can have certain remanufacturing, you can have certain recycle, you can certain having reuse as well. So, that's, and you take the entire thing together, that becomes your life cycle, like entire life cycle of this particular product. Similar thing can be done for process as well, that is the entire life cycle. So, it also could involve site development, infrastructure development, material and product delivery, infrastructure use, end of life. Then again you have reuse, remanufacture, recycle and other stuff. So, that life cycle thinking means that you are looking at from the beginning to the end, to the entire life cycle, and you are trying to capture all the environmental aspect associated with those. So, that kind of leads to the big picture of the concept of circular economy, which we'll define it and then we'll stop and probably start similarly from like again from this point in the next video. So, circular economy, so far what we have is what is known as a linear economy. Now, what is linear economy? You saw, if I go back to this particular slide again. So, this is your linear economy. So, that's, you have a line here. So, you got the raw material, you did the material processing, you manufactured it, you used it, and then you just dispose it, and then it kind of goes into the system. In circular economy, what we need to do is you take this, and this is your end of life, and then you try to bring it back into the system. So, that is the concept of circular economy. So, again it will go to this to the system. And since it is a circle, so that is why it is here. So, it is you have design manufacture, then you have retailer, then consumer, then reuse repair, then you have the recycling center, and then the things kind of comes back into the economy. So, that is the concept of circular economy. What we saw just over here is a concept of linear economy, because it is a straight line. Now, we are talking about circular economy, where with this waste is minimized, we are trying to minimize the waste. So, that is how, if a circular economy is an alternative to a traditional linear economy, which is make, use, dispose, in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible and extract the maximum value from while it is in use. Then recover, regenerate the products and material at the end of each service life. It's a restorative and regenerative by design, means that we are trying to have a closed loop system. The material is constantly flowing in a closed loop system rather than being used once and then just discarded. So, here the value of material is not lost while being thrown away. So, it's recovered and reused again. So, this is here you can see the example of like you have this bottle, which is kind of made again you can have a linear system where the bottle is just used up and thrown away, and then you can try to go for circular system where things are being used rather than throwing away. You recycle them as much as possible, you recycle it and make it good for the environment, come up with this kind of concept of recycling, reuse and all that. So, again circular economy, we have the raw material, you have the design, production, manufacturing, distribution, consumption, reuse, repair, collection, recycling, bring it back and maybe some residual waste. So, this residual waste, we have to minimize this residual waste. How much more we can reduce, better it is. So, we have to minimize this residual waste. We have to take it towards what is the concept of, today we talk about the concept of zero waste. So, if we can go towards the concept of zero waste, that is what it is. Zero waste, when we say zero waste, it does not literally mean zero, the number. It is the approach towards reaching zero. So, that is what we are talking about. So, let us stop here and we will start from this point again in the next video. So, thank you. Okay.